Country is once again at a political crossroads. The main opposition party, the SPLM-IO, has rejected President Salva Kiir's latest call for a dialogue, citing arrests of its leaders and ongoing military pressure, with Vice President Riek Machar reportedly under house arrest and the 2018 peace agreement under serious strains. Fears of a return to conflict are growing. Joining us now to speak about these tensions is Professor Jok Madut Jok, a leading South Sudanese political analyst and professor of anthropology at Syracuse University in the United States. But he speaks to us from Kenya. Professor Jok, a very good evening to you, and good to speak to you on such an occasion.
Very good evening to you, ma'am. Pleased to be back with you.
So just give us your thoughts about where South Sudan is at as we talk about these growing political tensions. Could this have been foreseen?
I think you are right in using the word crossroads. I think that is exactly where the country is at the moment, politically at least. What is happening is that there was this peace agreement in 2018 which brought together the government and opposition movements, including the SPLM-IO. This peace agreement called for a transitional government of national unity, which was established to steer the country towards an exit from these turbulent times. But this was not to be, because the parties could not agree on the modalities of the implementation of that agreement. And the result was that the interim period was extended once, it was extended twice. And eventually it culminated in a big breakdown of the peace agreement, including the SPLM-IO leaders being thrown into jail, threatened and fled the country. The chairman of the SPLM-IO, Dr. Riek Machar, somebody who is very familiar to the South Africans and the rest of Africans, is currently under house arrest for months on end. And there is no indication to whether he will be tried in court for the accusations of inciting his military wing, the SPLA-IO, and some paramilitary militias affiliated with him, something called the White Army, to attack an army garrison. South Sudan Defense Forces a garrison in a place called Nasser and killed 800 soldiers. This was definitely the final straw that broke the back of the camel when it comes to South Sudan being able to steer its way to peace and stability. So this is where we are today, and a lot of political leaders. There was this initiative sponsored by Kenya called Tumaini, which means hope, which brought together all the whole-out groups that were not part of the 2018 peace agreement. But this one fell apart because the parties could not agree. The government under President Salva Kiir felt that these negotiations were not leading to anything, and simply the parties left. The mediator was disappointed and even offended in that the president was the one who called Kenya to mediate, but then the president did not follow through with some of the agreements, the protocols that were signed. So as we speak, the country is in a state of no war and no peace. Meanwhile, the country is also going down the drain in terms of the economy, which has tanked, in terms of continued violence among communities throughout the country, in terms of instability.
Okay. Professor Jok, can I just stop you there and say we'll get to the socioeconomic ramifications in just a moment, but I just want to zero in on the political processes and the commitments that have been made, which have not been met, which you spoke about. The SPLM-IO speaks about President Salva Kiir's appeal as a piece of political Theatre saying he's being disingenuous in this call, given the fact that their leaders are under threat. Some have gone into exile. And the fact that you are in Kenya now, which has played mediator. And I want to talk about IGAD. What are their sentiments about where South Sudan is at the moment, and who do they see as a protagonist for the current situation? Are they pointing a finger at President Salva Kiir?
Yes, the Kenyan mediator, General Samboyo, who was also the architect of the big peace agreement between Sudan and South Sudan in 2005, is definitely frustrated, especially by the position of the government of South Sudan under Salva Kiir, in that this government was the one who called for talks. And then when the talks began to include a lot of things that the government had not planned, including the opposition people calling for overhaul of the security services, calling for major reforms in the way resources are distributed, calling for a constitutional review and dialogue, all these things were not anticipated by Juba. Juba had simply thought that the whole out groups will be brought here, offered positions in government, and invited to Juba to join the government. Meanwhile, the government will not be able to resolve the socioeconomic and political insecurity issues that had brought it to the peace agreement to begin with. And so this one did not fly. The opposition didn't say, the opposition people said that we don't want another power sharing agreement because this is what we have been doing for a good 20 years, since 2005. Power sharing agreement is not going to solve the problem of South Sudan. It has to be an overhaul of the political system to streamline possibilities of a transition, political transition. And so where we are at the moment is that the government of Kenya is disappointed in the position of the government. The opposition leaders are saying there is nothing that is going to bring peace except for them, together with the government, sitting down in a constitutional dialogue, an inclusive dialogue, to try to chart out exactly what is the problem of South Sudan, and then secondly, how to solve that problem. And the government says in public that yes, they are interested in such dialogue, but behind closed doors, the government is fighting a war. President Kiir himself keeps saying, I will not take South Sudan back to war, but that is exactly what he's doing. In the wars that have happened recently in Upper Nile, in the dismantling of the SPLM-IO, and in refusal to sit down and discuss the future of this country, including the release of the protagonists. The biggest challenge to President Kiir is Dr. Riek Machar, who is behind us. So how can the country really chart a way forward in circumstances where the contenders are basically using, hitting below the belt of each other? And so we really do wonder where this country will end up. At the moment, there are no good signs.
You pointed to the socioeconomic circumstances as a result of the peace agreement unraveling. You also spoke about the ethnic divide, the Dinka-Nuer tensions, and what we're seeing as the attacks on the Nuer. What are the chances of the peace agreement collapsing so badly that there will be a resurgence of civil war? Or is there anything that regional bodies can do, the AU, IGAD, the United Nations, civic organizations like the CEPO?
Well, I think the essence of this situation is that the government under President Salva Kiir feels that they have won the political battle, and that they have also won the military battle, and that they are not under any pressure to talk peace with anyone. I mean, this is a very dangerous place to be as a country, because that is certainly not the case. if the government fights the Nuer, at least the Nuer who are opposed to it, it's not a winnable war. If the government chooses to think of itself as the winner of these battles and try to forge forward without any dialogue, the country will still be in the rut that it has been for 20 years, at least for 15 years. But with regards to the consequences of that political stalemate, most of which is the fact that communities are still fighting each other along ethnic lines, the fact that the economy has collapsed. There are other factors, including the war in Sudan, which has blocked the flow of oil from South Sudan to Port Sudan on the Red Sea. But most especially is because of the lack of reforms, the level of corruption within the government, the level of intransigence when it comes to human rights abuses. There is certainly no hope that under this current leadership that South Sudan can really prevail.
When I look back at some of the major sticking points, particularly with regards to the more than decades-long peace agreements, between Sudan and South Sudan, and now also in the Sudan, the disarmament program was something that was seen as pivotal in ensuring there is stability. Has that effort continued to fail? And who's to blame for that?
Well, if we were talking about realpolitik, we can say that South Sudan, as a government, as a country, as a people, has the constitutional mandate to assert itself militarily, to monopolize the use of force, to ensure that citizens are disarmed. No citizen is allowed to kill other citizens with impunity. That would be the line that the government uses. The problem is that when disarmament takes place, it becomes a trigger for another round of war, either between communities themselves, because if you disarm one community today and plan to disarm the other one tomorrow, it takes a few hours for the disarmed community to be slaughtered. So concurrent disarmament has been the problem, that the government has not managed to disarm all communities at once so that nobody has an advantage. So then if you say that the government has the right to disarm and to prevent citizens from killing each other, the question is it equitable and just? And the answer is certainly not. But then if you say, what do you do then? What can a government running a country of that kind, what can it do to restore stability and peace? And I think part of the answer to that is dialogue. Because these conflicts may be military, may be strategic, may be political, but at the bottom of all of it is human security. It's the fact that citizens don't feel secure under the protection of the state. And they feel that they have to take the law into their own hands and rely on their ethnic coalitions to protect themselves against other ethnic communities. So unless the government brings together all the various communities and say, what is the problem? It will boil down to the fact that citizens don't feel safe. And when they don't feel safe, they arm themselves to the teeth. So part of the answer to that problem is for the government of South Sudan to seek genuine, credible, and tangible dialogue between communities that are at war with each other, and to communicate between the government and all the opposition leaders, communities, and to say that the government may have the responsibility to protect all, but it doesn't have the right to kill people in the process. There have to be measures that are in place to ensure that disarmament is done in a just way and in a safe way, so that it doesn't become a trigger for the next round of war.
And having said that, Professor Jok, what would you then say about the relevance of the 2018 peace agreement Is it up to contemporary conditions? What are the major changes that need to be made, if at all?
Mhm. Well, first of all, South Sudan has reached a space where it can no longer resolve its own problems without intervention from outside. And the legitimate and trusted entities to intervene are the regional powers, including the EAC, the East African Community, including IGAD, including AU, and including individual countries that have shown interest in being mediators, like South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, and the rest, and even to bring in some West African leaders like President Obasanjo, former president of Nigeria, who knows this conflict very well. And so there is a need for that international, regional, and perhaps continental intervention to help South Sudanese really come to the table and have a mediator who is trusted by both. The problem is that many of these parties are far partisan and they are not neutral.
Okay.
They all look at South Sudan from the point of view of what is in it for them, individually as a country, but also in regional terms.
Professor
And I think
Jok,
that is where the problem is.
unfortunately, we have run out of time, but always your insights much appreciated and your time as well. Thank you so much for speaking to us about those latest political developments in South Sudan. As he says, it definitely can be described as a political crossroads, as both the opposition and President Salva Kiir failed to see eye to eye on the need for dialogue. That brings the time to 10 minutes to, or rather, 30 minutes to 10. That was Professor Jok Madut Jok, South Sudanese political analyst and professor of anthropology at Syracuse University. He speaks to us from Kenya.